Welcome to my build review of the REVELL kit number 04352, or in other words the Saab J-35 Draken in 72nd scale. This kit was released in 2007 but dates back to 1957 if I understand correctly. If you don't know Scalemates, it's a great forum for modelers and it lists possibly every model ever released. To connect with me on Scalemates, just click on the link in the description. The Draken kit is a REVELL skill level 3 and consists of 66 parts. As usual, you can read a bit about the history of the jet in the manual. Furthermore, you can choose between 3 decal options. One for the regular Austrian Air Force, also one for the Swedish Air Force, and finally the one I chose, a special paint scheme celebrating 1000 years of Austria, as illustrated on the box art. The decals are of very high quality and so is the kit itself. The surfaces are detailed and there are lots of panels. The only real downside are the landing gear base. So why the Draken? Well, I'm an Austrian and my fascination for military airplanes started when I regularly saw Draken of our Air Force fly over when I was a kid. This fascination grew further at air shows where I also saw the last formation of operational Drakens as well as the red and white one. In 2016 I saw the last operational Draken from Sweden. Luckily a friend of mine had this rare kit rotting in his cellar and gave it to me. Thanks again for your donation and the photo shooting. Now to the actual building process. I was really unsure on how to deal with the red and white colors. First I sprayed everything white to get some kind of base coat on it. Next up were the base for the landing gear, the cockpit and the ejection seat. These parts lack detail, so I fabricated seat belts but also decided to close the canopy later on. To balance the Draken I put some Play-Doh in the front. I also had to use some putty in a few areas to close small holes and gaps. The next step was the engine, which I sprayed on the inside before gluing it together. As you can see, it's more detailed than the landing gear base. Meanwhile, I also assembled the wheels and air intakes. Then the whole process of masking began. At this point I have to say that I expected it to be a lot less time consuming because after all it's just a white stripe on a red plane. But accomplishing 2 perfectly parallel lines on an area that is not perfectly flat wasn't as easy as you might think. Anyways, I carefully masked top and bottom of the Draken and covered all the areas with paper so I would not get red overspray on the white area and vice versa. As you can see, it did not work out perfectly, so I had to repeat the airbrushing 1 or 2 times. You have to be extremely cautious with a partially white airplane. Every little mistake or tiny stain on your finger means extra repairing work. I painted the Draken and all my previous kits with enamels, but for my next builds I'm switching to acrylics, because I think that will be a bit easier. So masking and getting the red and white pattern on the kit took me the most time of the whole building process. When I was finally done with that, I added all the details that were left and tried to be as accurate as possible. Fortunately, I have many photos of the Draken from air shows and a museum, so I was able to recreate the real Draken as good as I could. With most models there is a point that I nearly ruined all the hard work that went into it till then. This time it wasn't the landing gear or the decals, but the gloss coat. I used these rattle cans for the first time and I'm not sure if it was the simple fact that I used too much of it, the low temperature, or that it's just not suited for this kind of plastic. But some areas that I sprayed became wrinkly and look horrible now. At least the surface was in fact glossy and I was able to put on the decals without any silvering effects. A critical phase was the weathering that I only tried on the bottom of the Draken at first. I used heavily diluted acrylics and the result was that satisfying that I also weathered the upper side. Something I was afraid of before starting the build was this large Osteriki decal. I feared that I might ruin everything close to the finishing line, so I cut the decal into 3 parts. Still, it was quite a challenge to put it on without any crinkles, but with a lot of patience and decal sol I made it. The history here is also quite interesting. In the year 996, the name of a country named Osteriki, which later became Austria, was mentioned for the first time in a document. The lettering on the Draken corresponds to this lettering on the first written mention of Austria from the year 996. Now enough with the history lesson. After finishing the decals, I assembled the landing gear and a few small details and sprayed the whole thing carefully with a matte coat. I did not use the decals for the cockpit glass because airbrushing the canopy worked like a charm. So here is the finished kit. I tried to get the same angles in which I photographed the real thing in the museum. I'm really happy with how my replica of one of my favorite jets turned out. It's not perfect, but definitely one of my best builds so far. Building it was really easy. What made it a bit difficult was mostly the white color. If you are relatively experienced with airbrushing and even more at masking, I can definitely recommend purchasing this kit. It's rather difficult to find one of those Draken kits, but maybe some of you got it in the stash without even knowing about it. As usual, here is a little time-lapse of the model. Yeah, I know, it's not very professional to use an egg timer to spin it around, but hey, it works. I bought the display base you can see here from Coastal Kits, and the other one is homemade from plaster. As always, I really want to hear your opinion. Be honest, what do you think about my Draken? After the Draken I also decided to get rid of the enamel colors, so my next builds will be painted with acrylics. At the moment I'm very busy, but as you can see I have plenty of kits waiting to be built, so please subscribe to see my latest work. Also tell me which one of these kits you want to see next. I'm preferring the Comanche, but I'm up for suggestions. So thank you all for watching and thanks for feedback. Bye!